Another step that I want to talk to you about, this is a really fun one for me because I've seen it help so many people and so many couples, and it's the subject of moods. Is there anybody here who doesn't have moods? Okay. Everybody has moods. What are moods? Moods are like internal weather, right? They're like the tides. Sometimes your moods are up, sometimes they're down, a lot of times they're in the middle. And when I refer to a high mood, I'm not talking about being giddy and unrealistic and silly and not taking anything seriously and all that. I'm just talking about a nice feeling state. When you're in a high mood, what's life like? Well, you're basically pretty charismatic and you have a sense of humor. Things don't get to you very much. You have a lot of perspective and you're not very defensive. And what happens if somebody criticizes you and you're in a really good feeling place? Well, you just, you either learn something from it and see a grain of truth in what they're saying, or perhaps you dismiss it because it doesn't have any validity, or perhaps you ask them more about it, but you don't feel bad about it. And what about if someone asks you about your future when you're in a really good feeling place? Well, you'll probably say something like, well, I feel a lot of hope about the future. I'm proud of what I'm doing and where I'm going and the contributions that I'm making. And what about if someone asks you about your past when you're in a really high mood, in a good feeling place? You'll say, well, this is like, I've asked hundreds of people this question. They all say the same thing. They say, well, my past wasn't perfect, and I had a lot of pain, and my parents certainly weren't perfect, but they did the best that they could. Now, I don't like to do this, but let's talk about the characteristics of a low mood. Okay? This is not something you should try at home necessarily to spend a lot of time thinking about, but when you're in a low mood, what's it like? I mean, you're pessimistic, you take things personally, every problem is like the tip of the iceberg, you get really uptight. Do you sweat the small stuff in high moods or low moods? Low moods all the time. And probably one of the most important sentences you can ever understand in your life, as far as I'm concerned, is that your mood is the source of your experience, not the effect. When you're in a low mood, you see bleakness, you see problems, you have no gratitude or compassion. The problem is when you're low, you have no wisdom, no common sense, no compassion, no love, but yet, when do you suppose most couples talk about their problems at home? High moods or low moods? It's unbelievable. Now, when I used to work with couples, I had a little stress management business, and people would come in, and sometimes I'd talk to them about these kinds of issues, and we'd talk about moods and how you can't really, solve your problems when you're low. You got to wait until your mood is up, when you have more love for each other. And invariably, one of the things that would happen is one of my clients would say, well, Richard, if we waited until our moods went up to talk about our problems, then they wouldn't seem like problems. And I would get kind of puzzled, and I'd say, well, I know that's the point. And so when you understand the power of mood, you start to see how deceptive it is. You start to realize that 9 times out of 10, now this isn't always true, but 9 times out of 10, when you're upset about something, it's mood related. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody walk around with those 1970s mood rings on their fingers, but it's important to be aware of your mood, and it's also important to be aware of the mood of those people around you, because people will do and say things in low moods that they would never do or say in a higher mood. It just would never occur to them. But what that tells you is that when someone's mean to you, or they're disrespectful, or they're short with you, all that means is that person's in a really low mood. Doesn't. If they were in a higher mood, they'd never say those kinds of things. So it's not like you should divorce your spouse and then think that you're going to like someone else when they're in a really low mood. It just wouldn't happen that way. I have a friend, George Pransky, who's a therapist in the state of Washington, who's a really wise guy, and he came up with this analogy that's really good. He said, when you're born into life, it's almost like you're on an elevator. And the elevator just goes up and it goes down, and the high floors are high moods, and the low floors are low moods. And the elevator is just going to go up and down on autopilot for your whole life. You're always going to be going up and down. The trick is to just not take any particular floor on that elevator too seriously. If your mood will always go up, how many moods do you think you've had in your life? 1 million, 2 million, 3 million? It's always gone back up. And the only way you can keep it down is to think about it and to get into analysis paralysis about it and try and figure it out. you'll notice that if you just don't do that, if you take yourself less seriously, don't make important decisions when you're low, don't take other people personally when you're low, just make allowances for the fact that you're low, then pretty soon your mood will start to rise, and all of a sudden the problems will disappear. And you have to understand that I'm not suggesting you don't think about your problems ever. It's just that if you have a legitimate problem and you're really low, don't you think it's still going to be there when you're higher? But the difference will be that when you're higher, you'll have common sense, you'll have a sense of humor about it, you'll think to yourself, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. Why was I making it? Why did I have to yell at my friend and all that kind of stuff? I didn't have to make such a big deal about it. Now, my wife, Chris, she's a delight. You know, she's really got a great sense of humor, and a lot of people think that I'm a pretty relaxed guy, but she makes me look like Mr. Uptight, you know. She really does. And she's got a lot of wisdom about this, you know. And so she's really hip to the fact that you never want to bring up issues when you're low, because if she brings them up when I'm low, I'll be more defensive and I won't listen as well and all these kinds of things. And so it's really important that we wait until we're in a higher mood to talk about it. So one of the things she does is we love to go out on Saturday nights, just the two of us, and get away from the kids for a few hours and just have some alone time. So invariably we'll be out at some restaurant or something, and we're having a really quiet evening, and she'll say something like, you know, Rich, you seem like you're in a really great place tonight, and you seem very peaceful and relaxed. And I'll say, yeah, I'm feeling really good. And she'll say, oh, that's so great, because there's something I want to talk to you about. So as a recap, what I want to say about moods is that there's two really important things to be aware of. Number one, don't trust the information you're getting when you're low. Make allowances for the fact that you're low. And number two, the idea is to be graceful when you're low and grateful when you're high, when you're feeling good. Most people, it's just the opposite. When they get down, that's when they take life really seriously. And that's the worst thing you could possibly do. So if you keep those things in mind, I think you're going to find that the stress that you experience is going to be diminished dramatically. Kindness is so important to me that I want to leave you with my very favorite quote. I have many favorite authors. Perhaps one of my favorites is Stephen Levine, who really works in the hospice movement and is credited with not so much starting it, but being one of the real movers and shakers in that field to get it started a number of years ago. And he has this beautiful quote that it just always brings tears to my eyes, and I want to leave you with that today. He said, if you had an hour to live and you could make just one phone call, who would it be to, and what would you say, and why are you waiting? No? We all have the capacity to stop sweating the small stuff. There's lots of benefits. And I hope that you'll put some real time and reflection into what we've been talking about today, because it really can make your life even more joyful than it already is. Thank you very much.